what the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast
with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Welcome to The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and this week we'll take a look at these stories. Blue Rodeo, as iconic a Canadian music group as there is. And this year, they head back on tour, performing their most commercially successful album, 5 Days in July, in its entirety 30 years later. Jim Cuddy of Blue Rodeo on their success and longevity coming up.
Oh, it was such a great conversation. And when someone you follow on social media recommends something to try, we're curious, right? We trust their opinion. But what if you find out they're getting paid to give that opinion? Well, that's the issue with some dietitian influencers who are getting paid to post ads. Is that ethical? We asked two experts. And vaccination campaigns are kicking off as COVID cases are on the rise. Flu season is upon us, and RSV is still an ongoing concern. We know you have a lot of questions, so we brought Dr. CHRISTOPHER Labos on to take your calls. This is very useful information if you're wondering when or if to get a shot.
But we begin with this. After the embarrassment and shame that resulted when a Nazi fighter was lauded for his service in the House of Commons, the question of how many other Nazis were admitted to and allowed to live in Canada is back in focus. Those details have yet to be released, but now there's a new push underway to correct that oversight. So, of course, in the wake of the big story that now is, I guess, a little over a week old, when the House of Commons decided to honor someone who we later found out had served as a Nazi in the Second World War, I think it's fair to say that all hell broke loose. There have been a lot of apologies. It cost the Speaker of the House, of course, his job. The Prime Minister was taken to task for this as well. But it begged the question that was asked then, so we're going to follow up on this now, and it seemed like a reasonable question to ask. What was this person, as a Nazi, already doing in Canada?
And living peacefully.
How was he living a regular...
Quietly.
Guy's 98 years old. He's lived here since the end of the Second World War. How did that even happen? And are there others, now that we found this out, who may be in the same situation? So that's what we're addressing here today. By talking to David Mattes, he's Senior Legal Counsel at B'nai Brith Canada. He is on the line. David, thank you for being here this afternoon. I understand you've been involved in this kind of idea of finding out who are here, where do they come from, how do we allow them in the country. You've been doing this for quite some time. Is that correct?
Yes, since the 1970s.
What are we doing 50 years later still not being able to have this information?
It's, I would say, an indication of the size of the problem. We've had so many people come here that shouldn't have come here, that they've constituted a significant lobby for doing nothing. And of course, I mean, it's not just them, but there's people who supported them, people who argued in favor of them, people who thought this issue shouldn't be raised. There is a substantial constituency still for doing nothing on this issue.
And yet a list exists. I understand from your work that you did back in 1986, the Dietician Commission, there's a list of 240 alleged Nazi war criminals who are probably still living here in Canada if they're still alive. Why do we not have these names? Why is this not public knowledge?
Well, the list is even longer than that. I mean, the Dietician Commission had a list. But there was a war crimes unit that was set up that had over 1,000 files that we're trying to get hold of. And the historian Howard Margolian estimated there was maybe 2,000 people in Canada who fit that description of people complicit in Nazi war crimes. I would say now we've got a combination of reasons, but when we've tried to get the files, what we've got is a huge number of files, a huge number of theoretically applicable legal exemptions, and the incapacity to process these files to look word by word whether any of these exemptions apply. And what we need is some sort of blanket exemption decision to say we're going to release all these files. And that's what a parliamentary committee recommended 25 years after a file has been created. The documents in it should be released. And that's what the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, of which Canada is a party, recommended. Give Holocaust remembrance a priority over all these exemptions. We just need to get them released without the necessity of going through every word exemption by exemption.
Mm-hmm. You're describing a situation here where you have a parliamentary commission saying, yes, we can do this. It's 25 years later, yet for some reason it's still not being done. Is there, in your estimation, someone holding this up for a reason? Why is this happening, do you think? Or why should I say, is it not happening?
Well, I mean, the government hasn't said we don't want to do this because the people that we've talked to are basically applying the present law, present policy. The parliamentary committee recommendation is relatively recent. It's just a few months old. And the government, unfortunately, as we can see, moves very slowly.
There's a quote that is really quite magnificent that you gave to CBC, that you said along the lines of, when we're remembering the victims, we've done a pretty good job. We've done a lot for that. But when it comes to the murderers, we've failed. Can we rectify that at this point?
Well, I think that's, of course, particularly important because learning about the victimization is, of course, important. But if we want to learn the lessons of history, if we want to remember the lessons of history, if we want to avoid repetition of the mistakes of history, we have to find out about the murderers, about what happened, why they did it, who they were, how it could have prevented, what we knew beforehand. The historical record that would be useful in preventing repetition of the mistakes of the past is largely hidden from us. And getting that information has contemporary relevance because we're still faced around the world daily with genocide, unfortunately. And because of, I mean, it's different if the record wasn't there, but it is there. And so we really should be able to look at it.
When you say hidden from us, I mean, that's of concern in and of itself. Hidden from us, why? For whose benefit?
Well, of course, different people will have different reasons for that. Obviously, for the people who are implicated, it might be for their benefit. For the people who justified or argued for the arrival of these people in Canada, it might be for their benefit. As I say, unfortunately, there is a constituency that doesn't want this information released. But I also think, I mean, it's not just that. It's also the present system. And it's not just the Holocaust record system. The present access to information system has collapsed. It's not working. I mean, the information commissioner, Carolyn Maynard, has said as much. We've developed a non-functional system. And it's beyond me to suggest how the whole thing could be reformed, but we need at least to extract these sets of records from that unworkable system and release them now.
If ever there were a time to do it, it is now, off of this controversy, and yet I feel like politically it would make Canada look so much worse on the world stage that, Nazi war criminals are here and have lived happily here for many, many years now. So that's got to be a big part of why the work is not getting done.
Well, I would say to a certain extent it's the opposite. I mean, the fact that the Canadian Parliament gave a standing ovation to somebody from a Nazi SS division looks very bad in the context of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because the Russians have weaponized it as propaganda against Canada and Canadian support for Ukraine, and it's fed into their narrative that they're invading Ukraine as an exercise in denazification. And I think we need to make our own effort of denazification in order to counter that narrative.
If I could go back for people, because of course things like what happened last week in Ottawa reopen history to some degree in Canada after the end of the Second World War. There were people taken in from various countries, and as we're finding out now, many of these people ended up having served in the Nazis, or with the Nazis rather. What was the policy at that time? How did this happen back then? Do you know?
Well, there's a historical report written on this by Ulti Riddell, which itself has been subject to a number of unnecessary deletions, but it's been released in part. And part of it was simply that there was the Cold War, and there was a premature end to the Nuremberg tribunals. There was a notion that we had to somehow placate West Germany by not being too hard on Nazi war criminals, which the West Germans themselves never asserted. They when they got their own government, they started prosecuting Nazi war criminals, but the Allied powers at the time were in control of West Germany, and they basically thought that there is this new Cold War, and the Nazis, of course, played that card, the anti-communist card, saying we can help you combat communism, there were some people who basically just overlooked the Nazi past because the Nazis were allies in the battles against communism, and so that was one component. Also with this Galician division, this was a group of the Nazi Waffen SS division, which was caught in the West after the war, and the British in the territory where they were that the British were controlling had this group, didn't want to send them back to the Soviet Union because they realized, I think correctly, that they would have been executed. So, and they didn't want to keep them either, so they persuaded Canada to take them. Now, I personally think that Canada at the time should have said no, but that's how we got them.
Yeah.
We're going to run out of time, Mr. Madison. I just want to make sure I ask you this because, as you said, you've been working on this since the 70s. This is your life's work. Do you think you'll see what you hope to see come of this in your lifetime?
Well, there's certainly a lot more attention to this now than there has been in a long time. And we have, of course, Mark Miller, who's Minister of Immigration, who said that something should be done. I mean, he doesn't control the file, but it's useful to have somebody in cabinet to say that. And I also know that this has reached the attention of the Prime Minister's office in a way it never did before because of all the publicity around the mistake about Rhoda. And Hunka. So my own view is there's a definite possibility. I mean, my attitude is one has to keep on trying, but I am hopeful that something will happen in my lifetime.
David Mattis, Senior Legal Counsel at B'nai Brith Canada. To your point, I mean, now with all the focus on what has happened, what did happen a week or so ago, you could think that would only help and not hinder this effort. At least you would hope so, wouldn't you?
Well, certainly that's my hope. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, I've kept on working on this file because I have not given up hope, and I think even after all the perpetrators and all the victims have passed on, it's important to keep this historical record alive, not just as remembrance, but to learn of it, to avoid the repetition, because this whole dynamic of hatred and mass murder continues, as I said, to this day.
Mr. Mattis, we want to thank you for your time.
Thank
Very
you.
much appreciated. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me.
Informative,
Interactive,
and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
When someone you follow on social media recommends something to try, we're curious, right? We trust their opinion. But what if you find out they're getting paid to give that opinion? Well, that's the issue with some dietitian influencers who are getting paid to post ads. Is that ethical? We asked two experts. So when you're scrolling along on social media and someone you follow recommends something, I bet you're intrigued, right? If it works for them, it might work for you, whatever the product may be. And I think we have a tendency to kind of take things at face value rather than perhaps questioning, hey, is that an ad? Are they trying to sell me something? Well, yeah, because that person might be getting paid to tell you to try this and buy that. It's an issue that has come up with dietitian influencers. Yeah, that's a thing. Dietitian influencers. These are registered dietitians being paid to sell products to us on their social media platforms. Is that ethical? We're going to get two perspectives on this. In a moment, we'll be joined by Timothy Caulfield. So he's a professor of health law and science policy. But first, let's speak with Joelle Emond, who is president of the Quebec Order of Dietitians. Thanks for your time today, Joelle.
Good afternoon. My pleasure.
So my understanding is that it's not really ethical, and Quebec would like to put an end to this?
Actually, our dietitians are currently bound by their code of ethics, and so there are articles in our code of ethics that are addressing this matter. For example, like a dietitian in his capacity as a dietitian is not allowed to use his or her name to be associated with a trademark or for proving such a trademark, in such a manner to mislead the public or to create a false impression. And then also, they're not allowed to sell any product or act as as an agent for the sale, promotion, or representation of a product, again, in such manner that is misleading the public or creating a false impression. That code of ethics also say that our health professionals, such as dietitians and nutritionists, because both titles are reserved in Quebec, they have to act and to provide information and recommendation to the public in that case when they are on social media to the public being like the entire public, not a specific individual, but the population or the viewers, people who are looking at them. And so they are bound to offer evidence-based information about nutrition. Now, where the question that we ask ourselves and what we are looking at currently is to see is it clear enough, like the part of the statement where it says, like, in such matter that as to mislead the public, should the perception of a conflict of interest also be taken into consideration? That's the question that we are asking ourselves right now.
Okay. So I'm kind of seeing it as that there should be neutrality, right? And if you're getting paid money to promote something, how can you be neutral on whether or not it really works?
100%. Well, that's exactly what, right now, the way the statement is written or the article is written, this has to be proven. You know what I mean? And so if there is a perception of conflict of interest, it's not, it could be, well, it's up for a discussion.
Mm-hmm. Has there been pushback from the influencers?
Well, people who do use, because there is a lot of good things that are being done by dietitians on social media, some very relevant information that is being transferred or through the social media.
Mm-hmm.
What people that are members who are, well, dietitians who are on social media are saying that they have a role to play there, and they must be present just so they can talk, like they can be first where people are going for information, but also where at the same place that other people transferring or talking about misleading the public with and for false information about nutrition is also present. And so we do understand and we do see a value for dietitians being present on the social media. The question is whether or not paid partnerships are a thing that should be allowed, even if it's evidence-based. Because if the paid partnership, if the dietitian is giving an information that is not evidence-based, it is clearly going against their code of ethics and against the law. But the fact that, so again, like the question this week is the perception of a conflict of interest also a concern that we should address.
Okay. I want to bring Timothy Caulfield into this conversation, a professor of health. Thank you, Joelle. Thank you. He's a professor of health law and science policy. And Timothy, what I think to myself is, you know, at some point it does say paid partnership or something. So is the onus on us to make that to make that distinction, or should it be more on these influencers who are perhaps, you know, hoping that we don't notice that it's paid advertising?
Well, I agree with Joelle. I think the onus is on the professionals. And keep in mind, what's happening here is that these companies are paying these professionals. They're trying to leverage the influence and the credibility of professionals in order to sell their products. So I think it needs to be absolutely clear, at a minimum, when this is an ad. And as you probably know, right now, often what happens is they'll just put a little hashtag ad on the post, or perhaps they'll say that they're an ambassador or a partnership. I don't think that's enough, and I think that we need clearer rules about when this is a paid post. And I think it's important to emphasize this is really common. Our own research has found that commercial content is very, very common, and sometimes it's not obvious. It'll be a post that looks like they're making this wonderful meal, or that perhaps they're recommending how to make some kind of smoothie, and then you click through it, and it's a product placement. And so I think it has to be immediately apparent, because you got to remember, our information environment is so chaotic. It's so chaotic and frenetic that unless it's right up front, people are going to miss it.
Yeah, I wonder, though, as you describe this, you know, what if you are that dietitian and you actually genuinely believe in that product, you've used it, you're familiar with it, there's a scientific basis for it, you want to promote it, yet you're not able to because the laws, or as they stand right now, the regs, prevent you from doing that, even if you do admit that you're being paid for it.
So a couple of things there. First of all, what we're talking about, I think both of us, is transparency, right? Making it clear that this is a paid ad. And secondly, there's a pretty robust body of evidence that tells us that, you know, if you are paid to do something, it's going to have either an explicit or an implicit impact on your perception, right? And that happens to all of us, by the way. It happens to all of us. So that's one of the reasons why conflicts of interest need to be clearly disclosed. And the other thing I think is important to recognize is we also know, again, from good research, that influencers do have a tremendous impact. So these ads, they work. You know, that's why these companies are paying them. So we've got to figure out how to regulate it appropriately, I think.
Good luck with that.
Yeah,
I see that as a potentially, bigger and bigger issue as more and more people get into this. It's kind of like, I believe in this product, but I'm getting paid for it, so I can't really afford to do anything. I can't say anything because I risk,
I don't think there's a way to do this
going
ethically.
around the regs.
I think there have to be no paid partnerships. If you are someone who is in that position, you're providing health advice to people. I don't think.
Wow.
It's like, would you let doctors try to
sell me cigarettes?
Actually,
Yeah,
it
they did
happens
that.
with drugs. Come to think of it, in doctors, though. Interesting. Anyway, thank you so much, Timothy and Joelle. We very much appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll revisit this. I think there's a lot more to this story. Again, we're talking just dietitians, but imagine just broaden that out. Who can say anything about something they believe in, and you find out getting paid, so right away you'll assume that this is all, being done to generate cash, and you can't believe them at all.
If it's not health, it's different. To me, when your health is involved, anyway. That was Joelle Emond, president of the Quebec Order of Dietitians and Nutritionists. We also spoke to Timothy Caulfield, professor of health law and science policy at the University of Alberta.
We're going to speak to them again.
Informative,
Interactive,
and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Vaccination campaigns are kicking off as COVID cases are on the rise. Flu season is upon us, and RSV is still an ongoing concern. We know you have a lot of questions, so we brought Dr. CHRISTOPHER LABOS on to take your calls. This is very useful information if you're wondering when or if to get a shot.
Here we are. It's October. The provincial government going ahead, instituting a new vaccine campaign, making it free for everybody, if you want to. But there's still a lot of questions out there. We get them all the time whenever this comes up about vaccines and should I get it and what should I do and what if I... So our good friend, Dr. Chris Labos, is going to try to help us out here.
Yeah, so we spoke to him just yesterday about this very topic. And listen, I know just the mere mention of COVID gets people, we get uptight and we're like, I don't want to hear it. But a lot of the time you have questions about whether you should be getting another one. Flu season, of course, upon us. We do know that there is an outbreak in long-term care homes. We spoke about it literally just yesterday with Dr. Labos. And RSV is still an ongoing concern. So you've got questions. Here is your opportunity. You can call 514-790-0800 or you can text to 514-800. We're doing this instead of question of the day today because whenever we have Dr. Labos on, you're texting in and asking things, and we don't ever have the time. So today we are taking the time. Dr. CHRISTOPHER LABOS is a cardiologist with a degree in epidemiology. You can hear him every Sunday morning at 8:10 on weekends with Ken right here on CJAD 800, and he joins us now. Hi, Dr. Labos.
Hello.
We're making this a regular thing.
Yeah, well, you know what? Yesterday was kind of an introduction. Then we thought, what if you able to give us the time? As Natasha said, we get questions every time this comes up. There's still a lot of questions being asked. So we thought, rather than come back to them a day later, if you have a question for Dr. Chris Labos, now's the time to call 790-0800, or you can text us at 514-800. And anything to do with vaccinations, and it doesn't have to be just COVID, because we know we're dealing with a flu season now, as Natasha mentioned, RSV. There's a lot of different things going around. So if you have any questions, whether, it's right for you, you should wait, when was the last time you had a booster, whatever, give us a call. Dr. Labos will seek to get you the answers.
So I have a question out of the gate, and then I'm also going to read you a text, which is pretty indicative of the kinds of texts that we have. So my question quickly is, I had COVID, but a very, very mild case of it. It barely showed up on the test, Dr. Labos, back in May. The whole family had it, but I was the one who, for whatever reason, had the most mild test result. When or should I be getting a vaccine, and when should I consider that?
Right. So the general guidelines are going to be 6 months. Now, there's always a bit of a margin of error to these things, but the point is that you need to wait at least some amount of time for any antibody levels that you would have developed post-infection to wane. So if you had your last infection in May, 6 months after that is going to be November. So you want to wait that sort of 6 month interval. To do it sooner than that, it's not as if there's any harm, but it is going to minimize the benefit of that vaccine dose, because you're not going to be able to boost your antibody levels if your antibody levels are already high. Now, if you're a more elderly individual, if you're immunocompromised, there are reasons why you might want to consider a shorter interval, and that's why you have occasionally seen the government say, 3 months for certain high-risk groups. So somewhere in that interval is probably the sweet spot. And for simplicity, the government sort of blanket recommendation now is 6 months. So May will take you to November, which is probably when you're going to be making an appointment if you try to log on to Click Santé today to make an appointment. So it will sort of all work out.
Good to know.
All right, we are joined today doing things a little differently by Dr. CHRISTOPHER LABOS. Quebec rolling out its vaccination campaign. So you've got COVID, you've got flu, you've got RSV. They're all around, and we're heading into that time of the year, obviously, when things are likely to get worse as opposed to get better. More people heading out, holiday season, families getting together, that kind of thing. Kids will have been in school for like a month or two. So all these things maybe combined are probably going to make things worse. So we thought if there are questions to be asked, here's a great way to do it. You can call and ask Dr. Labos, who is on the line, and try to get some information on whatever, whether it's COVID, whether it's about RSV, whatever questions you have. To Natasha's point, so many people have had COVID at one time or another. Should you consider getting the new shot? When should you? We kind of answered that, but if that's a concern, yeah, by all means. 790-0800, 514-800. Let's start off with Ellen on line one. Ellen, what's your question for Dr. Labos?
Yes, hello. Thank you for taking my call. The question is, I've noticed that there has been a greater incidence of many people suffering from eye infections. I'm wondering if it might have something to do with the new COVID variant.
Yeah, so we have heard, sort of anecdotal reports of this. It hasn't systematically been evaluated. You have to remember that whenever somebody talks about pink eye, which is what people are referring to, that is a viral infection. It's not usually a coronavirus infection. So could coronavirus also cause inflammation of the eye? Yes, in theory it could. It hasn't been one of the most frequent or reported symptoms associated with COVID-19. The classical symptoms of COVID-19, despite the many variants, have still been respiratory. They've been, fever, cough, shortness of breath. You do have these sort of atypical variants, people with more gastrointestinal side effects and, the neurological symptoms that tend to persist for long periods of time. But the classical core symptoms are really the classical respiratory ones that you would get with any respiratory infection. There have been some people reporting eye infections, but it's always a little bit hard to draw an association between the two, but it is not completely implausible that COVID could also cause inflammation in the eye, which is what you're seeing when your eye turns red. That's basically inflammation in your eye because of an infection.
Asking questions, looking for answers. Here's more of Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Welcome back. Taking questions today. A little bit of a change in format because we have arrived at that time in the year when the provincial government has decided, we know what we're dealing with here, at least we think we do. So we're going to roll out vaccine campaigns. And yes, there's flu and there's still COVID and there's now RSV. So we thought for people, if you are one of those people who wanted to know what should I be doing based on what I think I should be doing, my age, if I've had COVID. If you want to ask a question, Dr. CHRISTOPHER Labos is here to answer them for the next few minutes. So you can give us a call, 790-0800, or text us at 514-800. And if he can, he will answer that question for you. And I'll try to give you a little bit of direction as to what should happen next for you.
So on the text line, we've got this question that says, can I get the flu vaccine and COVID booster at the same time? Dr. Labos?
Yes, absolutely. And if you log on to make your appointment, you would get that option. The reason why, and people keep asking this, because initially the government's recommendation was to not get both vaccines on the same day because there was this concern that we wouldn't be able to tell which vaccine was causing potential side effects. Now that we have more experience with the COVID vaccine, we know that side effects are pretty typical and fairly similar to other vaccinations. You get, a little bit of soreness, a little bit of redness. You might have a mild fever. They're generally mild for the vast majority of the population. So for the sake of convenience, you can get both on the same day. If you want to make two separate appointments, you can, but for many people, that's just going to be an extra source of inconvenience, and there's no reason why you have to space them out.
Okay, I want to sort of address this that came in on the text line, asking about how the question actually says, how crucial is it for pharmacies to offer free COVID tests again? We know that's what we had first go around. That's not the case anymore, right? Now you have to be in one of those vulnerable groups to be able to get it for free. Otherwise, you pay for it. Is that right?
No, it's free for everyone, and that was the announcement that the health minister made. I think there is a lot of confusion here, and I think a lot of it also stems from the fact that, prior to COVID, the flu vaccine was not freely available to everyone. You had to pay if you weren't over 65 or, part of one of the vulnerable groups. And I think that does create a disincentive for people, because when you tell people you're not covered, a lot of people interpret that to mean, well, it's not essential for me to get it. Now the COVID vaccine is free for everybody, and the flu vaccine is free for everybody. And, even if you want to make the argument about certain low-risk groups, is that as efficient in terms of resource allocation? You can make a cost-effectiveness argument against it. But I think there's a major benefit to this type of approach. Number one is it simplifies the messaging, which is everybody is covered. But two, it highlights to people that you believe this is important, because when you have these sort of selective groups, it unconsciously or not signals to certain individuals that, maybe this isn't that big a deal. Whereas now we have a much cleaner message, which is, no, everybody can get it. It's free for everybody, and you're removing that barrier. Because even a nominal fee of $20, that may not be a lot of money to you, but it might be a lot of money to someone else.
Well, and about testing, I think we have a texter here who's making the point that they're not testing anymore because the pharmacies aren't handing out free test kits, Doctor. Should we be taking testing more seriously?
Yeah, we probably should, and you're right. You can't get it at pharmacies anymore, but you can get it at testing centers. So when you go to get your vaccinations, those places, which the government is trying to turn into sort of one-stop shops where you can also get blood tests, those are places where you can get tests for COVID-19. So you can also inquire about how to go about that sort of thing. But yes, we should be taking testing more seriously, because if you don't know you have COVID, you can't actually get any of the treatments that would help with COVID, and especially if you're a higher risk individual. Things like Paxlovid, they may help a little, and they're not 100% cures, and they may not be as effective as some of us originally hoped, but they will help a little bit. But you won't know that unless you actually get tested in the first place. Okay,
let's go to the phone. We've got some people holding. If you have a question for Dr. Labos, 790-0800. Let's go to Susan, who's on line 1. Susan?
Hi, Dr. Labos. My question is regarding the vaccines. I will be getting the COVID vaccine. I will be getting the flu shot, which I get every year. I don't know about this RSV vaccine. Do we all need that too if we're seniors?
If you are seniors, then yes, you probably should get it, because RSV lands a lot of people in the hospital every year. The RSV vaccine has been approved by Health Canada, but there's been no official word from the provinces yet about when they are going to roll it out. One assumes it's coming down the pipeline soon, but as of right now today, the RSV vaccine is not being rolled out yet. So that may be something that happens next month, one hopes, but eventually RSV probably will enter the cycle of one of these seasonal vaccines, because it is one of the other viruses that tends to make the very old and the very young get very, very sick and end up in hospital.
Do you have to wait for that to be rolled out if you wanted to? If you could you get it done privately if that vaccine exists and is already approved by Health Canada?
In theory, you could, yes, because Health Canada is who decides if the vaccine can be put onto the Canadian market. Then it's up to the provinces to decide how they, whether they cover it and who they cover it for. But yes, you could, in theory, go and get it privately. It would be somewhat expensive, though, potentially, if you were ordering it directly from the manufacturer.
Okay, and again, for people not as familiar, when we talk about RSV, I know we talk about it just by saying RSV. Can you just explain really quickly what it is?
Well, RSV stands for respiratory syncytial virus. It was the thing that was making all the kids sick last year around this time. So if you remember how bonkers things were a year ago, especially in the pediatric hospitals, a lot of it was RSV, and it is a virus. And, if you're young and healthy, if you're a man in your 20s or, a woman in her 30s and you're perfectly healthy, you'll probably get over it in the same way that you would with any cold or flu or pneumonia. But the very young and very sick get very, very sick, and it kills people every year. It is not a trivial issue, medically speaking.
Okay, back to the phone. Mike is on the line. Mike, what's your question for Dr. Labos?
Hi, Dr. Labos. I want to ask you a question. You're a heart doctor, right? A cardiologist, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the situation. My girlfriend is 61 years old. She got the 3 boosters. And after she got the 3rd booster, she got a golf ball under, like a golf ball thing right under her armpit. Then 2 weeks later, she got pericarditis. Not myocarditis, pericarditis. Usually, she went to the doctor. They gave her a medication. Didn't disappear. It's supposed to, I went on the internet. It says 2 to 3 months it disappears. It's over a year and a half she has it. Doctors can't figure it out. The heart institution on the east side of Montreal can't figure it out. So can you tell me what you think that could be, the possibility is?
Okay, so when somebody after vaccination gets a golf ball-sized thing under their armpit, that's probably a swollen lymph node. Okay, so that is something that happens with any infection or any vaccination. You have a rev up of your immune system, and the accumulation of immune cells in the lymph nodes makes them swell. If you've ever had a very bad throat infection, you might have had a ball in your throat, a lump that you can feel. That is a swollen lymph node. So that's sort of irrelevant to the question of pericarditis. Pericarditis is an inflammation of the envelope around the heart. It happens with infections, and it has been happening with a certain number of people who get vaccinated for the same reason. Your immune system revs up, and it causes inflammation around the heart tissue. It usually does go away after a while. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No one's saying anything.
By cancer?
Oh.
I'm sorry, I missed that, sir.
Can it be caused by cancer?
Well, it can in some situations be caused by cancer, but that's a pretty rare occurrence. Most cases of pericarditis that we see are post-viral syndrome. So somebody gets sick with something, and the mere fact of the virus being in your system causes your immune system to rev up. Could it have happened post-vaccination? Yes, it could. It does go away. Now, here's the important point. There's a difference between a symptom and a disease. So you may still have symptoms that are similar to what you had at the point, or your girlfriend may be having symptoms similar to what she had at the time. You still have to establish that it actually is the pericarditis. If there's no biochemical evidence of inflammation in the pericardium, either on blood tests or on radiology, then it's not pericarditis that are causing the symptoms, and that's why you sometimes have to look for other possible
Mike,
diagnosis.
Thank you for the call. I want to squeeze in at least a couple more here while we can, because I know we're going to lose you in a second. Someone's asking, who can get Plaxovid? People may remember Plaxovid is what you would take in pill form. Who's allowed to get it, who's not?
It's really the elderly, the high-risk groups, the immunocompromised. The pharmacists have a whole protocol. And the one situation in which you can get tested for COVID is you can go to the pharmacy. If you are eligible for Paxlovid, they will test you. If you're positive for COVID, then they can prescribe you Paxlovid without you having to go through a doctor.
Okay. We're going to take Gloria's call real quick. Gloria, go ahead.
Hi, doctor. I received my sixth booster at the end of August. I'm a senior and planning a trip next January. I would like to get the bivalent, which I didn't get last time, before I go, but it will only be 4 months since my last booster. Will I be able to get that? Should I? Shouldn't I?
Okay, so it's not the bivalent anymore, because now the vaccine that's rolling out now is different than what came before. It is a new vaccine specifically directed against the circulating variants. If you're at 4 months, that's a little soon. That's probably going to blunt some of its effectiveness, and that gets back to the point I was making earlier about, weighing risks and benefits and how high risk you are. You're probably going to be safe enough to wait 6 months, because if you start pushing that interval too short, the vaccine is not going to give you that much added benefit. There's no harm to taking it, but there is sort of a more minimal benefit.
Okay. Gloria, thank you for the call. Just on this question, and we're going to have to wrap it up here. Someone's asking, I'm not sure if this is, I'm sure a lot of people probably find themselves in this situation. Someone's saying, I have expired rapid tests at home. Are they still accurate if they are?
Great question. I was actually going to start researching this for another piece, but so I guess the answer to that is stay tuned. There may be an article coming out about that very, very shortly. The answer is, to a large extent, yes, because Health Canada and the FDA have actually pushed back the expiration dates based on more monitoring. You can actually go online and check to see if your particular lot number is in that reassessment or not. But for the vast majority of people, yes, they probably still are, but of course all things do expire eventually, even though that date is maybe not as hard and fast a rule as some people seem to think it is.
Right. Okay, we're totally out of time, but I got to squeeze this in because a couple of people on the text line asking about kids. What's the situation with kids right now? Should they be getting vaccinated?
So, they are eligible because they are eligible for everybody over the age of 12. Do they need it? It depends when their last COVID infection was and depends when their last vaccination was. If they got sick recently, which frankly a lot of kids had, again, you can push that out for 6 months and then reassess what the situation is. So, and it again depends on how, whether they have asthma, whether they are immunocompromised. There's a lot of issues there. So the short answer is yes. The much more complicated answer, it depends. And again, you want to sort of use that spacing out 6 month interval as your frame of reference.
Dr. Labos, want to thank you for the time. We could go on like this forever. There's so many more texts, but that's it for us. Again, thank you so much. We do appreciate it.
My pleasure. You take care, guys.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Blue Rodeo, as iconic a Canadian music group as there is. And this year, they head back on tour, performing their most commercially successful album, 5 Days in July, in its entirety, 30 years later. Jim Cuddy of Blue Rodeo on their success and longevity coming up.
They met in a hurricane, standing in the shelter, out of the rain. She tucked a note into his hand. Later on, they took his car, drove on down where the beaches are. He wrote her name in the sand.
Could listen to this pretty much all day. It's a shame we have to stop listening to the music, but then again, it is Jim Cuddy on the line, and he is part of Blue Rodeo, so I guess that makes sense.
That
It's
works.
a nice
yeah,
song.
I can deal with that.
So the good news, Jim Cuddy, as I said, and Blue Rodeo coming to town. They're here tonight, Place des Arts, and this is one of those interesting situations where it's not just a kind of generic, if you will, Blue Rodeo concert. They're going to recreate, if you will, an album originally recorded back in 1993. So this is the, believe it or not, the 30th anniversary of 5 Days in July, that album, which all makes us feel so incredibly old. Thank you, Jim Cuddy. He is, as I said, on the line. Jim, thanks for being here.
No, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.
So it's how old it makes us feel, having grown up to this music. How old does it make you feel?
Boy, talk about throwing that back in my face. I don't know. It doesn't seem that long ago that we were camped out at Greg's place in the summertime and playing the record. I mean, I guess it's a long time ago because, of course, we got it out we made it in July, and it was out on the airwaves in October. So records don't come out that quickly anymore. So
boy, that's for sure. Can you talk about the experience? Because from what I read, of course, you talk about recording this in a barn. What was that experience? And I understand as well, this wasn't even supposed to be released as an album originally, was it?
Greg will love the description of his home as a barn, but we did it in his living room. He's got a little farmhouse outside of Toronto, and it was never considered to be a mainstream record for us. It was something that we were just so exhausted from all the touring we did for Lost Together that we wanted to do something that was gentler on our ears and our souls. And so we decided to do an acoustic record, and we thought, we'll just put out this record will be just a little side project. And I think we were pretty aware as we were making it that it was going to be more than that. Because although it was acoustic, it had a very full sound. It had a lot of character. So I don't think we knew what it was going to become, but we knew it was something more than just a little side project.
I was thinking about how in long-term relationships, you have to work, right? You have to always work to kind of keep things new and keep things solid. And that could be applied, I guess, with songs and being in a band as well. So, how do you reach a point where you're keeping it new and you're not just going through the motions, doing these songs night after night for 30 years? How do you be present and in the moment, Jim?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think that when you have 7 different people in a band, 6 at that point, now 7, you have a lot of there's a lot of creative input. Certainly making new records and having new songs and creating more music helps. But you have to, I think what we do is we get into sort of these 12 to 16 month periods where we're working on a particular set and using a particular set of songs. It usually culminates in some bigger show like the Amphitheater in Toronto or something like that. This year is different now that we're going around and playing the whole 5 days in July. That's been fun too, and we've had to create a whole different set. And we have a huge catalogs of songs to draw from. Plus, we have a record that wasn't that long ago. So I think that it's all about everybody's will to be there, everybody's keeping up high standards of playing, and I mean, inevitably, our job is repetition. So at some level, it's going to be repetition.
Yeah. And I'm sure when you go to a Blue Rodeo concert, people are yelling out songs. They all have personal favorites. That's got to be part of that concert experience, I guess. So that's going to happen, I guess, again tonight. But
yeah, I think so. But they can't yell anything from 5 Days in July.
Well, they can. But
only going to be if they yell, they're not paying attention.
Well, there you go. I will ask the question. This has become something, I guess, in the relatively recent history of music, of rock and roll music, rock, pop, whatever you want to call it, where you take an album, and in the case of 5 Days in July, a very successful album, obviously 6 times, 7 times platinum, and you recreate that album from the beginning. And I wonder how hard it is. I mean, you remember doing this 30 years ago. When you get on stage and perform a track after track, the entire album, how odd is that?
It's very odd. Again, another good question, because the dynamic of an album is not anywhere near the same as the dynamic of a concert. A concert, you're dealing with a lot more a contained energy. You want people to go the dynamic to go up and down. And with an album, it could be pretty mellow. I mean, 5 Days in July ends on a very mellow note, and so we felt a little awkward doing it for the first little while. But I think it triggers so many memories in people that it seems fine. And we sort of do it as a set, take a break, and come back and do another set of catalog music.
Now, I know in the original, you had some special friends, special guests, including, I didn't know this, Sarah McLachlan stopping by to record. Any plans for special guests as the performance here?
Well, we always have a female singer. So tonight it's Melissa McClellan from Whitehorse. And so we were going to have Sarah out west when we played in Vancouver, but she got laryngitis, that didn't happen. But so we'll always have somebody with us. Frequently and mostly, it's been Melissa McClellan.
Lovely.
She's done fantastic.
Okay.
I'm wondering if it's all flown by. Like, I'm thinking, I look back at these albums and it takes me back to a time and a place. And I feel like, Blue Rodeo has just been such a part of our collective history as Canadians. And yet it's like 30 years. How's that possible? Do you feel that way too, Jim?
I think that the difference for me is that by the time, in the 30 years ago, we were what we considered to be mid-career. We'd already had four records at that point. And I guess that was the point where you thought, okay, now bands start to tail off. We did this record and it shot us up again. So I'm not hearkening back to university days or college days. We were in the process of doing good theater shows and so I remember all the different set pieces we had. I remember what a thrill it was to be doing this record on the road.
Wow.
Because we filled the stage with couches and lamps and we just made this, try to recreate Greg's barn, as you call it, but his home on the stage. And so it was a really enjoyable tour. And, we stuck with that for a number of years. We don't do that anymore, but we stuck with that for a number of years. So I think that it falls into the continuum of our career. We can certainly get all nostalgic about our origin days of playing bars and first playing Massey Hall and first playing Théâtre Saint-Denis and all the things that we did for the first time. But that really ages us.
It's funny because as I hear you describe this, and people, it's one thing if you're a solo performer, it's another when you're part of a band, and that question always comes up. What about the other guys in the band? When you make that phone call, hey, let's put the band back together. We're going to head back on the road. Was that ever an issue here, or was everyone just chomping at the bit to do it?
Well, we've never had to say, let's put the band back together, because the band has never stopped being together. And, we've always sort of longed to be the longest lasting band in Canada. And once Rush retired, then we felt like we had a chance. But
there you go.
We can't overtake 5440 because they're still going, and they started when they were 12. So we just can't overtake them. So unless they quit. But no, we've never had that. We've always done these record tours, made another record, talked about what kind of tour we wanted to do, where we want to go. Obviously we've changed over the years. We used to go everywhere in the world. We don't do that as much anymore. It's too exhausting. And so things have changed and they've tapered or been sort of refined more, but we've never had to say, let's get the band back together.
Yeah, no, when I say get the band back together, I mean, you want to go on the road. It's a band, right? There's different personalities. People have different ideas. I just wondered how hard it was. Clearly, it's not very hard at all, which is great.
Well, no, it's not. And it's also, that is the way we make our living, by playing.
Yeah, but you're independently wealthy also, now, Jim.
It's not even that. It's that I think we pride ourselves on being a good band, playing well. And that requires, you can't take 2 years off and come back and be as good as you were. And I think for some of us, I have a solo band, which I work at a lot. I know that a lot of us, we kind of like sharks have to keep moving through the water. Yeah. We need to play to keep being satisfied with ourselves as musicians.
Well, it's just inherently who you are. I think
it's not, as I said, because they're independently wealthy now. They don't need to do this anymore. It's because this is in their bones. This is why they do it.
In our bones, that's right.
Jim, last time we spoke, I think you were on tour with your son, and I was wondering if you're always kind of thinking about what's next. Like, you're on tour doing this right now, but are you always thinking what's down the line? Are you going to be working with your son again?
Well, definitely thinking about what's down the line, but I actually just did an East Coast tour with my two sons. So Sam and Devin, we did small theaters in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia for the last 3 weeks, and that was really enjoyable. And
good for you.
I mean, I love to. It's very nice to mix up the activities, the different musical activities. I played with my solo band on the weekend, and so for me, I have a lot of variety, and it's also nice to get back to the mothership. I mean, everything's just a little bit better.
And it's nice for the fans, too, no question. Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo. Jim, thank you so much. It's always great talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Take good care. That wraps up another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and we will see you next week.
Hope you're having a happy Thanksgiving.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.